Rain tapped gently on the chapel's windows, soft as breath. I stood there next to a white coffin so small it looked like a cradle carved from sorrow. My knees trembled, but I didn't fall. I held my baby's teddy bear in my hands, still smelling like lavender and tears, and looked into the crowd of stiff faces pretending to care. My daughter Evie had lived for 6 months. 6 months of hospital rooms, gentle lullabies sung beside oxygen tubes, and hope dancing on the edge of heartbreak. And now she was gone. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. My husband, Dean, clutched my hand. He was shaking too, but my parents? My mother didn't shed a single tear. She sat beside my sister Celeste, dolled up like she was heading to a gala, not a graveyard, and whispered with a smirk. Then, during the hymn, my mother leaned toward me. Her breath was warm against my ear. At least now you can finally focus on Celeste again. She needs your support. The words didn't register at first. My eyes didn't blink. My lips didn't part. My world just stopped. I looked at her slowly. She smiled softly, like what she said was some kind of gift. My grief to her was a burden lifted. Dean's grip on my hand tightened, sensing something, but I didn't react. Not then. Because in that moment, I made a choice. Not to scream, not to cry, not to confront her. I chose silence. But silence wasn't surrender. It was planning. Back at the house, everyone gathered like vultures around catered food trays. My mom was already talking about Celeste's upcoming engagement party. She wanted to know if the diamond still looked too small for Instagram. My dad nodded in agreement while pouring himself scotch, as if that afternoon hadn't held a funeral. I walked through the room like a ghost. Nobody made eye contact with me, not even Celeste. She just laughed with her friends, legs crossed, flipping her shiny blonde hair like the princess she always was. The next day, my mom called me, not to check on me, but to ask if I'd mind giving up Evie's room now that Celeste might need a quiet space for wedding prep. I sat in the empty nursery holding a baby sock. The mobile above me spun slowly, and I smiled. Not kindly, not sadly, but with clarity. If they wanted me to vanish into grief, to hand over everything to Celeste like I always had, they were about to learn exactly what it meant to lose something they loved. Because revenge for me would not be loud. It would be precise, personal, and permanent. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in Evie's room, the soft glow of her bunny-shaped nightlight casting long shadows on the wall. My chest ached like it had been hollowed out with a dull spoon, and yet there was something else stirring. Beneath the pain, beneath the raw grief, a quiet kind of rage, not the screaming, breaking plates kind, but the kind that plans, the kind that waits. I remembered things differently now. I remembered the pregnancy, how my mother grimaced when I said I was keeping the baby. "It's not the right time," she snapped. "You don't want to ruin Celeste's medical school journey with drama." I had been 5 months pregnant and throwing up blood. Celeste had failed out of her first semester, but they still clung to the fantasy of her success. It wasn't about truth. It never was. It was about image. Even when Evie was born early, sick and small, my mom never once visited the NICU. She said hospitals made her anxious. My dad said, "Newborns don't remember who visits anyway." They sent a card with no signature. Meanwhile, Celeste got a card for surviving her breakup. A Mercedes parked in the driveway right next to the used sedan I bought secondhand. Now they wanted me to turn Evie's nursery into a spa room for wedding prep. I stared at her crib, and I decided I would become the storm they thought I'd never be strong enough to summon. Dean tried to talk me down gently. "They're just ignorant," he whispered. "You don't need to prove anything." But it wasn't about proof anymore. It was about letting the truth sting. I start with something small, a message. I printed out a photo of my mom and Celeste at the engagement venue, draped in gold and pearls while I held Evie's ashes. Then I mailed it anonymously to the local paper's gossip column. They loved drama. It ran on page 4 under the title, "So, engagement glitz while daughter grieves, family photo sparks public outrage." That's when the cracks began. Celeste called me screaming. What did you do? I just said, don't worry, I'm sure people will understand. You're the important one. My mom sent a passive-aggressive text. Not everything is about you, Clara. You're being dramatic again. That was her favorite word, dramatic. She called me dramatic when I cried after Celeste posted baby Evie's health chart online for awareness clout. She called me dramatic when I refused to let Celeste's boyfriend take photos at Evie's funeral to boost his photography page. But now I wasn't crying. I was working. Because revenge doesn't need yelling, it needs timing. And I had all the time in the world. Next came the business. My father's law firm, Fairman Daughters, was the family legacy. The irony? I was the only daughter who actually had a law degree. But guess who was always paraded in front of clients? Celeste, even though she couldn't pass the bar exam that came with a cheat sheet. So, I pulled every email, every tax error, every sexist dismissal I had quietly documented over the years. I didn't go to the press, I went to the Board of Ethics. Within weeks, the firm was under investigation. My father called me, voice ragged. You're destroying your family for what? Some petty revenge? No, I said softly. I'm just finally telling the truth. He screamed. I hung up. That weekend, Celeste's bridal shower was scheduled at a 5-star estate. I showed up uninvited, wearing Evie's favorite lavender scarf. When a mother saw me, her jaw locked tight. This isn't appropriate. You're right, I said calmly. Neither is what you whispered at her funeral. The entire room fell silent. I didn't stay long. I just handed Celeste an envelope and left. Inside, a certified letter from the wedding venue. Their deposit had been canceled due to ongoing public controversy. Turns out, bad press makes vendors nervous. Celeste messaged me that night. You're sick. I stared at her text. She never once said Evie's name. Not once. The next day, my mother showed up at my house. No warning. She was crying. Her mascara had run. Why are you doing this to us? You whispered at my child's funeral that she didn't matter, and now you want grace? She was a burden on you, Clara. You needed a break. She wasn't a burden, I said through clenched teeth. She was my daughter. She was my light. And you blew it out. My mom collapsed onto the porch. Please, people are starting to talk. I lost friends. You didn't lose a daughter, I said, standing. So, I'm not sure you've lost anything yet. Then I walked back inside. Dean was in the kitchen, holding the baby book I never got to finish. I think Evie would have been proud, he whispered. No, I replied. Evie would have been protected. That's what I should have done, and now I'm doing it. The morning of Celeste's wedding, it rained. Not the soft romantic kind they use in films. This was bone-shaking thunder, sky-splitting lightning, winds that ripped through floral arrangements like they were paper. Her dream outdoor ceremony, complete with live harpists and dove release, was falling apart by the hour. I watched it unfold from the hotel across the street. Dean stood behind me, silent. He didn't ask if I planned it. He didn't have to. I hadn't summoned a storm, but I wasn't stopping one either. By noon, guests were being herded indoors to the ballroom where the gold-plated chairs hadn't even arrived. Vendors were late, the florist had double-booked, and the DJ had a fever. One of the bridesmaids texted in sick stomach flu. Celeste was spiraling, screaming at staff, yelling into her phone. And then came the final blow. My father's law firm, the one under review, had just been dropped by their largest client. Word had spread. The scandal made it onto LinkedIn and the city paper. My mother read it in the middle of hair and makeup. She fainted in the salon chair. I heard all of it, not from gossip but from my source, the assistant planner. A kind woman named Alina. She had once lost a baby too, and when she found out what Celeste and my parents did to me, she became an ally. We never exchanged money, just truth. Women who had been silenced often know how to amplify each other. The planner whispered that Celeste was having a panic attack in Pearls, that the groom's family was second-guessing the marriage, that people were whispering about me. She's here? They'd ask. No, someone else would answer. She wouldn't come, not after what they did. But I did come. I didn't sneak in. I walked in through the front door wearing a black dress, not for mourning, but for justice. The room stopped. Celeste saw me first. Her mouth opened. No words came out. Then my mom rose from her chair, face pale. "What are you doing here?" "Don't worry," I said calmly. "I'm not staying. I just brought something." I walked to the center of the ballroom and placed a small velvet box on the table reserved for family gifts. "Open it after the ceremony," I said. "Consider it a blessing." My dad looked like he wanted to throw me out, but he didn't move, because he knew the press was already sniffing around. Cameras might be outside. Everything had consequences now. I turned and left without another word. I didn't need to stay. The box would speak for itself. Inside it, Evie's birth certificate, a letter I wrote for her first birthday, sealed and unopened, and a single silver chain with a tiny heart-shaped pendant, her favorite. Attached was a note. "You could have loved her. You chose not to. Now she walks with me, and shame walks with you." They opened it during the speeches. My source told me my mother ran to the restroom and vomited. My father broke a glass. Celeste fainted again, but no one caught her this time. I didn't need to see it. I was already driving away. I didn't need revenge in the form of lawsuits or money. I didn't want their apologies. I wanted silence, not mine, theirs. I wanted them to sit with the echoes of what they'd said, the things they whispered when they thought grief made people stupid. They learned otherwise. 3 months later, the farm shut down. My father's name was removed from the bar directory. My mother stopped getting invitations to society galas. Celeste canceled her honeymoon for mental health, but was later seen trying to sell her wedding dress online. And me? I took the ashes and planted them beneath an old apple tree on a quiet hill near our home. Dean and I sat beneath it each week. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. One day, I brought a picture of Evie in her little blue dress and left it there. A little girl from the neighborhood saw it and asked, "Who is that?" I smiled. "She's the reason I became brave." The little girl nodded as if she understood. And maybe she did. Because grief is heavy, but truth, when it finally speaks, is thunder. And karma doesn't shout. It whispers at a funeral, walks into a wedding, and leaves behind silence.